Claire Whitman stood at the large window of her elegantly furnished living room, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. Outside, the sun was beginning its ascent, casting a golden hue over the sprawling garden that surrounded her opulent estate. The manicured hedges, vibrant flower beds, and towering trees painted a picture of perfection, yet Claire felt a profound emptiness within her. Despite the wealth and success she had accumulated as a savvy entrepreneur, an unshakable sense of dissatisfaction gnawed at her. With a sigh, she turned her gaze back to the garden. Today was significant. She had hired a new gardener, Jake Thompson, to maintain the grounds. The previous gardener had left abruptly, and Claire had been hesitant to bring someone else in, fearing the disruption of her carefully curated paradise. But she needed someone reliable, someone who could bring fresh ideas and energy to her beloved garden. As the clock struck 10, Claire heard the sound of gravel crunching beneath tires. She moved to the door, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. When she stepped outside, she caught her first glimpse of Jake as he exited his truck. He was tall, with an athletic build that spoke to a life spent outdoors. His dark hair was tousled, and his face bore a rugged charm that was both captivating and disarming. He flashed her an easy smile, his blue eyes sparkling with warmth. Good morning, Ms. Whitman. I'm Jake, he said, extending a hand. His voice was rich and deep, resonating with a friendly cadence that made Claire relax a little. Good morning, Jake. Please call me Claire, she replied, shaking his hand. She noted the strength in his grip and felt a flicker of something, a connection, that was both unexpected and intriguing. I'm really excited to get started, he said, glancing around the garden with genuine admiration. This place is incredible. Claire couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. Thank you. I've put a lot of work into it over the years, but I'm hoping you can help me take it to the next level. Absolutely. I'd love to hear your vision, Jake said, pulling out a notepad. They walked together along the winding paths of the garden, and Claire began to describe her ideas for new flower arrangements, the addition of a small vegetable patch, and enhancing the existing landscape features. As she spoke, she found herself captivated by Jake's attentiveness, the way he nodded and asked questions that demonstrated his genuine interest in her plans. As they paused near a cluster of vibrant roses, Claire noticed something glinting in the sunlight around Jake's neck. It was a pendant, intricately designed, with a striking resemblance to a family heirloom that had been lost from her family generations ago. The sight of it sent a jolt of recognition through her, stirring a long-buried memory of her grandmother's stories. A nice pendant, as she said, trying to sound casual, though her heart raced. Where did you get it? Jake's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. This. It's just a little keepsake from my mother, he replied, his voice steady but his eyes momentarily clouding with something that Claire couldn't quite place. Was it sadness? Regret? It's beautiful, Claire said, hoping to encourage him to share more. It reminds me of something from my family's past. Really? What's the story? Jake asked, his curiosity piqued. Claire hesitated, feeling the weight of her family history. It's just an old family heirloom. It went missing a long time ago, during a difficult time for us, as she admitted, her voice trailing off. I'm sorry to hear that, Jake said softly, his tone sincere. A family can be complicated. Yeah, it can, Claire agreed, feeling an unexpected connection to his words. She was surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him, to share a piece of herself. They continued walking, discussing plants and gardening techniques, but Claire's mind kept returning to the pendant. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Jake than met the eye. There was an air of mystery about him, a depth that intrigued her. As they reached the back of the garden, Claire pointed to a neglected area that had once been a vibrant flower bed. I'd love to restore this section. It used to be one of my favorites, as she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I can see why, Jake replied, kneeling down to inspect the soil. It just needs some love and attention. What were you thinking of planting here? Maybe some lavender and daisies, Claire suggested, her excitement building at the thought of bringing the area back to life. A great choice. Lavender will attract pollinators, and daisies will add a nice pop of color. We could start with some soil enrichment too, he said, glancing up at her with a smile that made Claire's heart flutter. It sounds perfect, she replied, feeling a warmth spread through her. As they worked side by side, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting dappled light through the leaves. Claire found herself lost in the rhythm of the work, the fresh scent of earth filling the air, mingling with the sweet fragrance of flowers. With every laugh shared and every story exchanged, Claire felt her initial apprehension fade away. Do you have a background in landscaping? She asked, curious about his expertise. Not officially, Jake replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. I grew up in a small town, and my family always had a garden. I just learned by doing, you know? It's always been a passion of mine. Really? That's wonderful, Claire said, genuinely impressed. It's rare to find someone who truly loves their work. I believe that if you're going to do something, you should enjoy it, he said, his eyes sparkling with conviction. A life's too short for anything else. Claire nodded, feeling a wave of admiration for his outlook on life. She was used to people around her who were driven by ambition and success, often at the expense of their happiness. Jake's simple yet profound perspective was refreshing. As the afternoon wore on, they took a break, sitting on a bench surrounded by blooming roses. Claire sipped from her water bottle, grateful for the moment of respite. What else do you enjoy doing when you're not working in the garden? She asked, genuinely interested. I love painting, he said, his eyes lighting up. There's something about capturing a moment on canvas that feels so fulfilling? Really? That's amazing. What kind of painting do you do? Claire inquired, intrigued. Mostly landscapes, he replied. But I also love capturing the essence of nature. It all ties back to my love for gardening, I suppose. Maybe one day you can show me some of your work, Claire suggested, a hint of eagerness in her voice. I'd like that, Jake said, his smile widening. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Claire felt a sense of contentment that she hadn't experienced in a long time. With each shared moment, Jake was reshaping her understanding of connection and intimacy. Yet, the pendant lingered in her mind, a thread of curiosity weaving through her thoughts. Thank you for today, Jake, Claire said as they wrapped up their work. I really appreciate your help. Anytime, Claire. I'm looking forward to working together, he replied, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. As he drove away, Claire stood at the edge of the driveway, watching the dust settle in the fading light. A mix of emotions swirled within her. Intrigue, excitement, and an unsettling feeling that the pendant might hold the key to something much larger than either of them could comprehend. With a deep breath, she turned back to her garden, eager for what tomorrow would bring. As the sun began to rise over the Whitman estate, Claire Whitman felt a surge of determination. The morning light spilled into her kitchen, illuminating the marble countertops and polished silverware. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the room, and decided to step outside. Today, she would engage more with Jake Thompson, her new gardener, and perhaps unravel the mystery behind that captivating pendant he wore. As she walked through the grand foyer, Claire paused to admire the ornate decor that adorned her home. It was a beautiful house, but lately it felt like a gilded cage. She needed this connection to the outside world, a break from her usual routine of meetings and conference calls. The garden, with its riot of colors and fragrant blooms, promised a respite. Jake was already hard at work when she stepped outside, his hands deftly maneuvering a spade into the earth. His rugged charm was accentuated by the way sunlight danced off his dark hair, creating an almost halo-like effect. Claire couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. Today, she would not just observe but participate. Good morning, Jake? As she called out, her voice bright and cheerful. He turned, wiping the sweat from his brow, his easy smile revealing a set of straight teeth. Morning, Claire. Ready to get your hands dirty? I believe I am, as she replied, rolling up the sleeves of her light linen shirt. What are we working on today? Jake gestured towards a patch of overgrown shrubs. I thought we could tackle these. They're blocking the view of that beautiful rose bush you have back there. Claire nodded, her heartbeat quickening as they moved closer to the garden. It sounds great. Lead the way. As they worked side by side, Claire found herself drawn into an easy banter with Jake. He spoke of his childhood in a small town, painting vivid pictures with his words. We had a huge backyard, you know. My mom let me plant whatever I wanted. I think that's where my love for gardening started, he said, pulling at the roots of a stubborn weed. What did you plant? Claire asked, genuinely intrigued. Mostly vegetables, he replied with a chuckle. But I also had a few flowers. I remember my mom loved daisies. She always said they were the happiest flowers. Claire smiled at the thought. Daisies are lovely. Simple yet beautiful, just like the best things in life. Exactly, Jake said, glancing at her, his eyes sparkling with warmth. You appreciate the little things, don't you? Yeah, I try to, Claire admitted. But sometimes I get so caught up in work and well life that I forget to stop and smell the roses. Jake laughed softly, shaking his head. You're in a beautiful place for that. This garden has a way of grounding you. As they continued to work, Claire felt a strange comfort in their conversation. It was different from her usual interactions, which often felt superficial and driven by ambition. With Jake, there was an authenticity that was refreshing. She stole glances at him, noting the way his muscles flexed as he worked and the way he brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, the pendant around his neck glinting in the sunlight. Can I ask you something? Claire ventured, her curiosity getting the better of her. Sure, ask away, he said, pausing to meet her gaze. What's the story behind that pendant? She blurted out, unable to contain her intrigue. Jake hesitated for a moment, his expression shifting slightly. It's just something my mom gave me, he said, his tone casual, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Just something? Claire pressed gently, sensing there was more to the story. It seems special. He looked down at the pendant, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. It is. It reminds me of home, of my mother's love. But it's not something I like to dwell on. Claire nodded, respecting his boundaries but feeling the weight of the moment. I understand. Family can be a complicated thing. Yeah, Jake replied, a shadow passing over his features. But we all have our stories, don't we? Yes, we do, she agreed, feeling a pang of empathy for him. Sometimes I think we hide behind our stories, afraid of letting others in. Jake met her gaze, his expression softening. That's true. But sometimes, sharing can help lighten the load. Claire smiled, appreciating his insight. Perhaps we can lighten each other's loads then. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of nature surrounding them, the rustle of leaves, the distant chirping of birds, and the soft hum of bees busy at work. Claire felt an unexpected sense of peace washing over her. This was what she needed: connection, purpose, and perhaps a little adventure. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the garden, Claire found herself lost in thought, her mind drifting back to the pendant. It had reminded her of a family heirloom, a piece that had been lost during a tragedy years ago. The resemblance was uncanny, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something more. Jake, as she called out, breaking the comfortable silence. Yeah. He looked up from his work, curiosity evident in his eyes. Do you ever think about where you come from? I mean, your roots? He paused, considering her question. I think about it sometimes. My childhood was simple, but it was good. My mom worked hard to provide for us, and she instilled a sense of gratitude in me. I admire that, Claire said, her voice softening. And my family has a complicated history. We had wealth, but it came with its own set of burdens. Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. Every family has its struggles, Claire. It's what makes us human. True, she replied, feeling a connection forming between them. Do you think we can ever fully escape our past? Jake shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. Not completely. But I believe we can learn from it and create something new. Claire's heart raced. There was wisdom in his words, a resonance that struck her deeply. I hope you're right. I've spent so much time trying to distance myself from my past, but maybe it's time to confront it. Maybe, Jake said, his gaze steady. Facing our past can be the first step to freedom. As the day wore on and their work neared completion, Claire found herself reflecting on their conversation. Jake had a way of seeing the world that was refreshing and profound. They wrapped up the gardening for the day, the sun casting long shadows across the vibrant blooms. Thank you for today, Jake, Claire said sincerely, brushing dirt from her hands. I really enjoyed our time together. Me too, he replied, a genuine smile lighting up his face. It's nice to connect with someone who appreciates the beauty of this work. As they stood side by side, Claire felt a flutter of something akin to hope. Perhaps this new chapter in her life was just beginning, and with it, the promise of adventure and discovery. She watched as Jake gathered his tools, her mind racing with thoughts of the pendant and the secrets it held. See you tomorrow, Claire. Jake called out as he walked towards his truck, casting a glance over his shoulder. See you, Jake? As she replied, her heart swelling with anticipation. As he drove away, Claire stood in the garden, lost in thought. The day had been more than just a day of gardening. It had been a glimpse into a world she had long forgotten. A world of simplicity, connection, and perhaps even love. And as she looked down at the vibrant flowers surrounding her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold, something that could change everything. Claire Whitman woke up with the sun streaming through her bedroom window, feeling a peculiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The events from the previous day replayed in her mind like a film on repeat. She had spent hours lost in thought about the pendant Jake wore, its familiar glimmer provoking memories of family gatherings and whispered stories of a long-lost heirloom. Today, she resolved to uncover the truth behind its origins. After quickly dressing in a comfortable sundress and pulling her hair into a loose bun, she headed to the kitchen, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. While sipping her coffee, Claire opened her laptop and began her research. She dove into the murky waters of her family history, scouring online archives and public records. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she typed in her family name, eager to unearth any information related to the pendant. Hours passed, and her heart raced as she discovered a long-forgotten article detailing a family tragedy that had occurred decades ago, an event that had left her family fractured in mourning. The pendant, a beautiful piece that had belonged to her grandmother, was mentioned in hushed tones, described as a symbol of hope and resilience. According to the article, it had vanished after a particularly dark chapter in her family's history, a loss that had never fully healed. Determined to confront Jake about the pendant, Claire spent the rest of the day preparing the garden for his arrival. She meticulously arranged the tools, laying out the pots and soil with care. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over her estate, she felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. When she saw Jake's truck pull into the driveway, her heart skipped a beat. He stepped out, his rugged charm accentuated by the warm light, and she couldn't help but admire how he carried himself, confident yet approachable. Hey Claire." Jake called out with a smile, his voice warm and inviting. Ready to get our hands dirty today?" Absolutely," as she replied, trying to keep her tone casual despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. I need your help with a few things, but first, I wanted to ask you something?" Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's on your mind?" Claire took a deep breath, her heart pounding. It's about the pendant you're wearing. It looks a lot like something that used to belong to my family. I've been doing some digging, and I can't help but wonder how you came to have it." Jake's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. He scratched the back of his neck, his gaze drifting away from hers. This old thing? It's just a trinket I picked up a while ago. Nothing special, really." Claire felt a wave of frustration wash over her. Jake, I'm not trying to pry. It means a lot to me, and it resembles something that was lost, a family heirloom. I just thought," as she trailed off, searching his eyes for any sign of honesty. He met her gaze again, but the warmth had dimmed. I get it, Claire. But the truth is, I don't know much about it. It's just something I wear. I promise, it's not connected to anything important." Are you sure?" Claire pressed, her curiosity getting the better of her. It just seems so familiar." Jake chuckled softly, attempting to lighten the mood. You know how it is. Sometimes things just end up in your possession, and you don't even know how. Maybe it fell off a truck or something." He winked, but the playful tone felt forced. Claire sighed, feeling a mix of disappointment and intrigue. Alright, I'll drop it for now. Let's focus on the garden. I have some ideas I'd love to hear your thoughts on." As they worked side by side, digging and planting, Claire's mind wandered back to the pendant. Jake's deflection had only deepened her curiosity, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than he was willing to share. She watched him closely, noting the way he moved with a certain grace and purpose, his hands deftly shaping the earth. It was easy to get lost in the rhythm of their work, the sun warming their backs as they shared light banter and laughter. Did you always want to be a gardener?" Claire asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Jake looked thoughtful for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow. Not really. I grew up in a small town, and when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. I loved painting and drawing. But life had other plans, you know? Sometimes you have to adapt. An artist? That's amazing. What kind of art do you create?" Claire felt her interest piqued again, her earlier frustrations fading as she learned more about him. Jake's eyes lit up at the question. I used to paint landscapes and portraits. There's something about capturing a moment on canvas that feels magical. I've always found solace in art, but I put it aside when I started working full-time. Maybe one day, I'll open my own gallery." A gallery? Claire echoed, genuinely impressed. I would love to see your work. You should definitely pursue that dream. Thanks, he replied, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. It's just been hard to find the time. Between work and life, you know. Claire nodded, feeling an unexpected connection forming between them. Yeah, I get it. Life can be overwhelming. But you should make time for what you love. It's important. They continued to exchange stories as the sun dipped lower in the sky, bathing the garden in a soft, golden light. Claire found herself laughing more than she had in years, the weight of her previous solitude lifting slightly. Yet, as the evening settled in, the earlier tension about the pendant lingered in the back of her mind. After finishing their work, Claire wiped her hands on her jeans and took a moment to admire their progress in the garden. You know, Jake, I really appreciate your help. This place is starting to feel alive again. Jake smiled, his expression softening. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's a beautiful space, and I can see how much it means to you. Suddenly, Claire felt the urge to press him again. Jake, I know you said the pendant isn't significant, but I can't help but feel there's more to it. If it were me, I'd want to know the truth. He hesitated, his expression hardening briefly before he shook his head. Some things are better left in the past, Claire. Trust me on that. Claire's heart sank at his words, but she didn't want to push him further. Okay, I respect that. Just know that if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Thanks, Jake replied, his tone softer now. I appreciate it. As they wrapped up for the day, Claire watched him drive away, her mind buzzing with thoughts of the pendant and the man who wore it. She felt a familiar pang of longing, coupled with the unsettling realization that her life was becoming increasingly intertwined with Jake's. The mystery of his past, along with the connection to her family, loomed large in her thoughts. With a heavy heart, Claire retreated into her home, the shadows of the evening creeping in around her. She couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were destined to cross in ways she hadn't yet imagined, and the secrets that lay beneath the surface were about to unfurl, revealing truths that could change everything. The evening sun cast a warm glow over Claire Whitman's expansive estate, turning the sprawling garden into a canvas of vibrant colors. Shadows danced beneath the tall oak trees as the gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating a soothing symphony that enveloped the property. Claire had decided to take a step beyond her usual solitary routine. Tonight, she would share a meal with Jake Thompson, her enigmatic gardener. As she set the table on the patio overlooking the garden, Claire felt a flutter of nerves. It wasn't just about the dinner, it was about unearthing the layers of Jake's past that intrigued her so deeply. She carefully arranged the cutlery and placed a bouquet of freshly cut roses in the center, their fragrance mingling with the earthy scent of the garden. When Jake arrived, his hands were still stained with soil from the day's work. Wow, Claire, this looks incredible, he said, a genuine smile lighting up his rugged features as he stepped onto the patio. You've really outdone yourself. Thank you. I thought it would be nice to enjoy the evening outdoors, Claire replied, her heart racing slightly under his gaze. I hope you're hungry. Starving, he said, chuckling as he took a seat. As they began to eat, the initial awkwardness of the situation melted away. The sound of cutlery clinking against porcelain mingled with the soft chirping of crickets, creating an intimate backdrop for their conversation. I've been meaning to ask you, Claire began, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. What drove you to become a gardener? Jake paused, his fork hovering above his plate. It's a bit of a long story, he admitted, looking down momentarily as if gathering his thoughts. My mom loved gardening. She used to say that plants are like people, they need care and attention to flourish. Growing up, I spent a lot of time helping her in our little backyard. When she got sick, it became a way for me to feel connected to her. Claire felt a pang of empathy. I'm sorry to hear that, as she said softly. It must have been difficult for you. It was, Jake replied, meeting her eyes. But in a way, it taught me resilience. I learned to appreciate the beauty in life, even in tough times. He leaned back, a faraway look in his eyes. After she passed, I wanted to keep that spirit alive. I guess that's why I ended up finding solace in gardens. Claire nodded, absorbing his words. She had never thought of gardening in such a profound light. It's amazing how something as simple as plants can hold so much meaning, as she mused. I've always seen my garden as a status symbol, but I'm beginning to realize it can be much more than that. Jake's gaze softened. It can be a refuge, a way to connect with nature and with yourself. I think that's what makes it special. They continued talking, and Claire found herself captivated by Jake's stories. He spoke of hiking in the mountains, of the small-town fairs he used to attend, and of the art he loved to create, each tale more vivid than the last. Claire shared snippets of her own life, the pressures of her career, and the loneliness that sometimes accompanied her success. As the evening wore on, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The soft glow of lanterns around the patio cast a warm light on their faces, and Claire felt a sense of intimacy growing between them. It was a connection she had not anticipated, one that brought both excitement and trepidation. Can I ask you something?" Claire ventured, her curiosity piqued by the pendant that hung around Jake's neck. That pendant. It looks familiar. Do you know what it is?" Jake's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. It's just a piece my mom gave me," he replied, his tone casual, but Claire noticed the way he touched it gently, almost protectively. Just a piece?" Claire echoed, disappointment creeping into her voice. It looks so much like an heirloom that belonged to my family, a pendant that was lost years ago during a tragedy." Jake met her gaze, his eyes darkening momentarily. I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't mean to make it sound unimportant. It holds a lot of meaning for me." Claire felt a pang of frustration. I didn't mean to pry. It feels like there's a story there, and I can't help but want to know more." Jake took a deep breath, his demeanor shifting as he leaned forward. It's complicated. Sometimes it's better to leave the past buried, he said, his voice low. But I understand your curiosity. The past has a way of catching up with you." Claire's heart raced at his words, sensing an unspoken depth within them. I get that. But sometimes, facing the past can also lead to healing, don't you think?" He paused, his eyes searching hers. Maybe. But it's not always that simple." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Claire felt the weight of his words, the shadows of his past looming just out of reach. She wanted to bridge that gap, to pull him closer, but a nagging doubt lingered in her mind. Could she trust him? After dinner, they moved to the edge of the garden, where the stars twinkled overhead like diamonds scattered across velvet. This place is beautiful at night," Jake said, gazing upward. You've created something magical here." Thank you," Claire replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But it feels empty sometimes. I think I've been so focused on success that I forgot how to truly enjoy life." Jake turned to her, his expression earnest. It's never too late to change that. You just have to be willing to open yourself up to new experiences." Claire's heart raced at the intensity of his gaze. And what if those experiences come with risks? What if they uncover painful truths? Then you face them head on, he said firmly. Life is messy, Claire. But it's also beautiful. The pain can lead to growth. At that moment, Claire felt a rush of emotion, a longing to reach out and touch him, to bridge the gap that separated them. But the uncertainty of his past loomed large, casting shadows over her heart. As the evening drew to a close, Claire walked Jake to the front of her house. The soft light illuminated his features, highlighting the lines of worry etched around his eyes. Thank you for dinner, Claire. It was unexpected, he said, his voice low and sincere. I enjoyed it too, Claire replied, her heart heavy with unexpressed feelings. I wish we could talk more, but I understand if you want to keep some distance. I appreciate that, Jake said, his eyes lingering on hers. But I don't want distance. I just need time. Time for what? Claire asked, her breath catching in her throat. Jake hesitated, his expression shifting. To figure things out. For both of us? With that, he stepped back, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer before he turned to leave. Claire watched him walk away, a myriad of emotions swirling within her. The connection they had forged felt profound yet precarious, teetering on the edge of something beautiful and terrifying. As Jake drove away, Claire stood at the doorway, her heart aching with unanswered questions. She felt the weight of the evening's revelations settle heavily upon her, intertwining with the secrets of her own past. The garden, once a symbol of her success, now felt like a labyrinth of emotions, each path leading to more uncertainty. With a sigh, Claire stepped back and sighed, her mind racing. The pendant, Jake's stories, their connection, it all hinted at a deeper mystery, one that she could no longer ignore. But as the night enveloped her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers she sought might come with a cost she wasn't yet prepared to pay. Claire Whitman woke up the next morning with a heavy heart, the events of the previous evening replaying in her mind like a haunting melody. After dinner with Jake, Where laughter and warmth had filled the air, there was an undeniable shift. The way he had looked at her, the way their hands almost brushed when passing the salt, these fleeting moments lingered in her thoughts, intertwining with the weight of the pendant that hung around his neck. She had meant to confront him further about it, to delve deeper into the mystery that seemed to shroud both his life and her own family history. But now, as she sat in her sunlit kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, a sense of dread washed over her. As she sipped her coffee, she glanced out the window at the garden. The vibrant flowers swayed gently in the breeze, yet the beauty felt muted. Where was Jake? He should have been there, pruning the roses or tending to the hydrangeas. Claire felt a pang of anxiety. She decided to head outside, hoping to find him working, but as she stepped onto the patio, her heart sank. The garden was quiet, too quiet. Jake? She called, her voice echoing against the high hedges. Are you out here? No response. The absence of his familiar presence sent a shiver down her spine. Claire walked toward the shed, where his tools were stored, but it stood just as empty as the rest of the yard. Panic fluttered in her chest as she turned back toward the house, searching for any sign of him. As she entered the hallway, her eyes fell upon a small white envelope resting on the polished table by the entrance. It stood out starkly against the dark wood, and Claire felt her heart rate quicken. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned it over. There was no address, no name, only her own name written in Jake's neat handwriting. With a deep breath, Claire opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The words seemed to leap off the page as she read, Claire, asterisk if you're reading this, it means I've left without saying goodbye. I can't explain everything now, but I need you to know that I care about you deeply. The pendant I wear is not just a piece of jewelry. It carries the weight of my past, a past that is entwined with yours. I promise I will explain everything when the time is right, but for now, I must go. Please don't look for me. It's for your own safety? Asterisk with all my heart, Jake. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She reread the letter, her mind racing. What did he mean by entwined with yours? Why did he feel the need to leave? The thoughts swirled around her like a tempest, a mixture of confusion and fear gnawing at her insides. She could feel the tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she forced herself to remain composed. No, 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 as she whispered to herself, shaking her head as if to dispel the mounting dread. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. Jake, please pick up. Where are you? She pleaded into the silence of the phone. After hanging up, Claire paced the living room, her mind racing with possibilities. Had he been in trouble? Was he hiding from someone? The questions spiraled, but one stood out among the rest. What was the connection between Jake and her family? The pendant he wore was a link to something deeper, something that felt just out of reach. She felt a sudden urge to investigate, to uncover the truth behind the pendant and Jake's sudden disappearance. Grabbing her bag, Claire ran up the stairs to her attic, where she kept old family documents and keepsakes. She had never paid much attention to them, but now they felt like a treasure trove of clues waiting to be uncovered. The attic was dimly lit, dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the small window. Claire rummaged through boxes filled with faded photographs and yellowing letters. Each item felt heavy with history, but nothing seemed to connect to Jake or the pendant. Frustrated, she pushed aside a stack of old books and stumbled upon a worn leather-bound album. Opening it, she gasped. The photographs were of her family during what seemed to be happier times. Birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. As she flipped through the pages, one particular image caught her eye, a family gathering in front of their estate. Claire's heart raced as she recognized a familiar face in the crowd. There is that, she murmured, squinting at the photo. There he was, a young boy with striking features, a small ornate pendant hanging around his neck, exactly like the one Jake wore. She felt the room spin around her as realization hit. No way, as she breathed, her mind racing. This can't be, as she flipped to the back of the album and found a name written in elegant script. Thomas Thompson, her great-grandfather's brother, who had vanished without a trace many years ago. Jake's last name echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. Could it be possible that Jake was a descendant of this lost relative? Claire's heart pounded as she pieced the fragments together. She had always known there was tragedy in her family's history, but she had never truly grasped its significance until now. Jake was not just a gardener, he was part of her family's past, a connection she had never anticipated. The realization sent waves of emotion through her, a blend of excitement and dread. But if Jake was indeed related to her family, why had he hidden this from her? And more importantly, What danger had he mentioned in his letter? Just then, her phone buzzed on the wooden floor, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a message, a notification from an unknown number. Claire's heart raced as she opened it, her hands shaking. The message read, I know what you found. Stay away from Jake. He's not who you think he is. The word sent a chill down her spine. Claire felt as if the walls were closing in around her. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Who was this person? What did they know? And why should she stay away from Jake? With her heart pounding, Claire made a decision. She had to find Jake, to confront him about everything. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. She needed to know the truth. As she gathered her things, a flicker of determination ignited within her. She wouldn't let this mystery consume her. She would unravel it, no matter what it took. Stepping out of her house, Claire felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she also felt a fire within her. She would find Jake, and together, they would face whatever secrets lay ahead. Claire paced the grand hallway of her estate, her heart racing as the weight of Jake's disappearance settled heavily on her chest. The luxurious surroundings, once a source of comfort, now felt suffocating, each gilded frame and plush carpet a reminder of her isolation. She clutched the letter Jake had left behind, her mind reeling from the implications of his words. What hidden truth could he possibly be referring to? With a surge of determination, Claire made her way to the attic, a place she hadn't visited in years. The wooden stairs creaked under her weight as she ascended, the dim light filtering through a small window casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dust motes danced in the air, and she felt a strange sense of foreboding as she reached the top. The attic was a treasure trove of memories, filled with old trunks and forgotten heirlooms. She rummaged through a stack of boxes, her fingers brushing against the smooth fabric of a once cherished quilt, now faded and worn. In the corner, a large trunk caught her eye, its leather surface cracked with age. She knelt before it, her heart racing with anticipation, and flipped the latch open. Inside, she found a jumble of items, old letters tied with fraying ribbons, a collection of photographs, and a delicate silver locket. But it was a yellowed photograph that drew her attention most. As she lifted it from the trunk, she felt a chill run down her spine. There, captured in time, was a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Jake. Who are you? Claire murmured, studying the photograph more closely. The woman's eyes sparkled with a familiar intensity, and around her neck hung a pendant that was strikingly similar to the one Jake wore. Claire's heart raced as she flipped the photograph over. Scribbled on the back in elegant cursive was a name, Lila Thompson. Thompson? Claire whispered, her mind racing. Could Jake be related to this woman? She suddenly felt dizzy, the pieces of a complex puzzle falling into place. She recalled the stories Jake had shared about his childhood, about his struggles and dreams. What if his past was intricately tied to her family's history? Claire took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had to find Jake. She needed answers, and she wouldn't rest until she uncovered the truth. She hurried down the stairs, her heart pounding with urgency. Outside, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the garden where she and Jake had spent countless hours together. Jake! As she called out, her voice echoing through the silence. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she glanced around, searching for any sign of him. Where are you? After a long moment, her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out, her breath hitching as she saw Jake's name flashing on the screen. With trembling fingers, she answered the call. Claire, his voice came through, low and tense. Jake. Where are you? I've been searching everywhere for you. I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't want to involve you in this, he said, his tone filled with an urgency that sent a shiver down her spine. Involve me in what? What's happening? There are things about my past that I've kept hidden, and they're connected to your family. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. Claire felt her heart race. What do you mean? You can't just leave me in the dark. He found a meeting in the attic. A photograph of a woman named Lila Thompson. Who is she? There was a long pause on the other end, and Claire held her breath, waiting for him to respond. She was my mother, Jake finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. And she had a complicated relationship with your family. I never knew the details until recently, but I've been digging into it. It seems there are secrets that go back generations, secrets that could put both of us in danger. Danger? What are you talking about? Claire felt a mix of fear and anger. You can't just leave me like this, Jake. I deserve to know the truth. "Yeah, I know, and I wish I could tell you everything," he said, his voice strained. But I need to protect you. There are people who don't want these secrets to come to light, and they'll do anything to keep them buried." Claire's mind raced as she processed his words. You're talking about something serious here. Can't we face it together? You don't have to go through this alone." "I wish it were that simple," he replied, his tone softening. But I can't risk putting you in harm's way. You deserve a life free from this chaos." Jake, please." Claire's voice cracked with desperation. "I don't care about the chaos. I care about you. We can figure this out together." "I need time," he said, his voice resolute. Just stay safe, Claire. I'll be in touch." With that, the line went dead, leaving Claire standing in the fading light, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her, her world turned upside down by the revelation of Jake's true identity. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the garden, Claire's thoughts spiraled. She could not shake the image of the photograph from her mind. The resemblance between Jake and Lila was striking. What had her family done to his? And why had Jake chosen to keep this from her? Determined to uncover the truth, Claire knew she had to confront her own family history. She turned back towards the house, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. She needed to speak to her mother, to dig deeper into the family secrets that had long been buried. "Mom," Claire called as she stepped inside, her voice echoing through the foyer. We need to talk." Her mother appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Claire? What's wrong?" "I found something in the attic, and I need you to explain it to me," Claire insisted, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mother hesitated for a moment, a shadow crossing her face. "All right, I'll come down. But you need to understand that some things are better left in the past." "No, they're not," Claire replied, her voice firm. "Not anymore." As her mother descended the stairs, Claire felt a sense of determination rising within her. The web of secrets that had entangled her life was beginning to unravel, and she was ready to face whatever truths lay ahead. With Jake's fate intertwined with her own, she knew that the time for hiding was over. Let's talk," Claire said, ready to confront the shadows of her family's past, knowing that the answers she sought could change everything.